All right, connected to cloud server. Hi, everybody. How are you? We've got Jennifer Doran, our wonderful psychic medium, and we have a new guest, Allan. I should have asked you before we recorded. Varah or
Varah.
Varah. I knew I had a 50-50 chance. God dang it. I'll just blame it on old age. Anyway, Allan Varah, and he is a very special guy. I do want you to either start talking about what you and Jen were talking about prior to me hopping on, or you can talk about your mission, your journey, your background, whatever.
Yeah, no, we can. Well, I think it'll probably make its way into conversation anyways. But I've been in the astrological space for a number of years. It was more of a passion project and a hobby, and over the last few years, it started to pick up a lot more momentum. And so I do quite a few readings, mostly just on a referral basis.
Astrology reading, because it was a little bit choppy, your speech, but I'm just astrological readings.
Yeah, and yes, astrological readings. And if it does break up, by all means, just jump in there and I'll repeat. I'm on a decent web line, but I guess we're probably about 10,000 miles apart or something.
Yeah, maybe.
But so I do a lot of the readings, but along the way, my journey just kept going more and more into a spiritual space. And as I felt a deeper call into that, of course, you start asking more and more questions about your own existence and kind of the world in which we live. And I was in spiritual amnesia for the better part of the first 30 years or 35 years of my life. And all the while, my intuition was telling me that there's so much more there. And I was mostly in denial of it. And it kept me very much grounded in a very practical, very, I would say, materially oriented lifestyle.
Well, was there any reason for you to be in denial, or is it just like, well, like us? I mean, like most of us, we didn't know.
Yeah, so I think it's probably a little bit of everything. You're raised in a culture and a family. There's a set of expectations heaped upon you. But the other flip side is I did really well in a very practical space. Like, it wasn't like I couldn't show up to work and succeed at it, and I was well rewarded for it, and I was being told over and over that this was obviously going to be a path to happiness. And when that path didn't materialize, and all the while my health started to deteriorate, I started, I was going through all sorts of different therapies trying to restore my wellness. And as I went further and further into that space, I just kept asking, or kept hearing the questions, is there something that I'm overlooking? And so oftentimes as I get into astrology, people will ask me, am I on the right path? Like, that's the number one question that comes up, is people are just curious if what they're doing is in alignment with what their intention is. And I can say that is, it's a harder question to answer. The much easier question is, am I on the wrong path? Because when you're on the wrong path, your body and your mind will show you virtually every day. It will tell you that something is misaligned. And so sometimes that's depression or anxiety. Sometimes that's physical maladies. Sometimes that's conflict with the world around you. And it may not necessarily tell you what exactly you have to change, but it does reinforce that something is out of alignment. And so in my case, I accumulated a phenomenal volume of heavy metals, mostly mercury.
Oh, gosh.
I would not wish that on my worst enemy. And instead of just completely bailing out of my practical life as the symptoms got worse, I went through chelation therapy, and it helped remove the mercury, but it didn't necessarily align me with a better path. And so all the while, it bought me more time on the wrong journey, and I just kept going. And of course, I had nervous system dysregulation, and I had sleep problems, and I had chronic digestive problems. And it was like one after another, and I'd go to every doctor, and they would all diagnose a symptom, but nobody could tell me exactly why an otherwise healthy-looking kid or guy was full of all these symptoms.
Yeah.
And so it's only more recently that it finally all came to an end. And I finally just said, you know what, I've had this call into the spiritual space. I've been advisor for, so many people, helping them kind of affirm their own path. It was finally time for me to listen to a little bit of the advice that I was giving and just go more full-time into a more meaningful, less egotic kind of existence. And so less about me and kind of more about purpose and intention.
All right,
so that's
wait,
where I am.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you. So when you were giving people guidance, were you giving them guidance through astrology or
Yeah. So
like
the
spiritual?
astrology,
Like,
yeah. So it was huge amounts of just personal development and introspective work, where I would help with, like, I studied as a side hobby relationship psychology, and I help people. Oftentimes, I have a background in finance, so I was helping them in the practical underpinnings of financial planning. But all these were just generally me doing my best to just help lessen the anxiety or suffering that people had in their lives. As I got into my 30s, I was asking these much deeper questions, like, why are we here? What is our purpose? And of course, those questions were spilling over into all my interactions with my friends, so much so that my colleagues were always, like, looking at me, scratching their head, like, Allan, you're very different from the rest of us. And I felt it. And then in my mid 30s, I met a well-known astrologer living in Southern Florida, and she showed me my chart, and I was endlessly curious. Like, I could not get enough of it.
yeah.
And in very short order, like, these stories would start to develop where I would see somebody's chart. And I took a course as I was living abroad for a while. I took a course in London. I was working with some brilliant astrological minds, and it all just started to convalesce in my space, in my mind. And then, of course, from there, the answers started to piece together a little bit better.
I've been taking, if I look like I'm not paying attention, it's because I'm looking at my paper and writing down notes.
No,
But
perfect.
I am, and I love you. Can I break this off a little bit and go to Jennifer and Erik? I would be very curious to know what Allan, what other life of his most influenced this current one as Allan Varah.
Okay.
Hi, Erik. I love you, by the way, in case you
Hi.
don't
Hi.
remember.
Yes, he just said, yes, I did forget.
Yeah.
Yes, I did forget.
Sorry if I can be a little long-winded. So by all means, if I get off.
Oh,
No. You're the star. You're the reason we're here. Okay.
Yes,
So no.
yes. Talk away. Yes. So Erik was kind of, he and I were like having a chat over here, and what he was saying about this is, quite frankly, he cannot pinpoint one life that led to this specifically, because there have been multiple that got you to this point. But this time, what he was saying is that you came in very connected to the earth, to the, like you said, the physical, the maybe more the material stuff. And that was on purpose. It was on purpose this time, because when you had this shift towards the more spiritual, the more knowledgeable, what he's saying is you reach a different group of people because you are so grounded, you are so connected here, you don't seem like a woohoo out there person who can't connect to many people. That's why it was like this for you this time. But no, he says I cannot connect it to one single lifetime.
Well, just share one lifetime, just one.
Okay. So what he keeps showing me
totally makes sense,
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I have been told that, and I have felt that to my core for years as the clearest explanation for exactly why I'm where I am. And it was, I did fine for a long time in that practical space, but all the while I was always the odd man out. I was always the guy that was, just a little bit, or maybe not even a little bit, but always a little energetically. I was always different from my colleagues, like always.
Wow. It's like me though. People will listen to me more than some because I'm a doctor, a reformed skeptic, raised by atheists. So people take you and I more seriously than they would somebody who is just wonderfully already like that. But I'm sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
Well, actually what he just said is like for an area, speaking of the spirituality, where there are a lot of outliers, he's calling them, you guys are not quite outliers. You're more in the mainstream area of this, so it makes it easier to reach more people. And the one life that he keeps showing me, you were a man in that life, and you were on the water a lot with the stars, and you were very isolated. This was a very lonely is not quite the right word, because you were happy in this life, but you were very alone.
Solitude.
Yes.
Beautiful, blissful solitude.
Mm-hmm.
When was it, and about where was it?
Oh God.
I mean, more or less.
Yeah, we're looking like more in like the 1800s, the early 1800s. And I do feel, okay, I'm always terrible with direction, Erik. So I feel, I'm like, okay, we're east. I'm east. I'm east, like in the European areas, I guess. My geography's not great. Sorry, that's east.
I know. Me neither. Is it in on an ocean or a lake or a river or something like that?
No, this is ocean. Vast. It's vast water, so ocean.
So maybe was it in the Atlantic Ocean somewhere?
No, it's not the Atlantic. And I'm sorry, my geography.
It's okay. It's fine. I said something near Europe, body of water.
Over there, yes.
What was Allan doing? Was he a sailor or was he a merchant?
I feel more like a traveler, like traveling. There's.
Where's the treasure buried, Allan? Okay.
Yes, it very. I don't know, nomadic, or I do a lot of traveling, but there is a base. There's a base someplace that I go back to.
Okay. What was the purpose of the traveling? Was it trade? Fishing?
No, exploration.
Exploring?
Yeah,
Okay.
Exploration.
Okay.
Jen,
all right.
Could you do me a favor? Could you ask if there was a tragic end to that life or to related lives, if you can see?
To that one, he says you die alone. You just die alone, and I see you in a boat, dead in a boat.
Oh no.
Yes, that could be considered tragic.
Yeah.
If I chose to be alone and that's the way I wanted to go, it's like,
I know, but the mother in me goes, "Oh no,
oh no, poor thing." Yes.
Yeah. Sounds awfully lonely.
Yes.
Then again, sometimes solitude and isolation is the greatest path to spiritual awakening. So maybe that was part of my journey.
Was that the purpose of his choice of solitude in that life?
It was part of it. Yes.
What was the rest of it? I mean, another part. You say one part.
Yeah. Well, there's always multiple facets of every lifetime.
Oh gosh, yeah, you're right.
But yes, that isolation, it was preparing you for. Okay, so what Erik is saying is it actually helped you to create balance for when you were going to be coming into lifetimes where you weren't going to necessarily have the physical isolation, but this life would help you be able to kind of regroup yourself even when there's a ton of people around, because that is actually more overwhelming. He says for your soul to have a lot of people and a lot of energies coming at you. So that life kind of helped you on a subconscious level be like, okay, no, I can balance my energies even with all of this going on.
Yeah.
Which is a big thing that you've accomplished this time, he said.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Okay, one more thing before we go into the astrology. Erik, can you tell us what Allan is here to teach and also what he's here to learn? I mean, what are the major ones? Okay. So this time,
I'm taking notes also. This is perfect.
Yes. So this time you're definitely here as what we in this industry would call a light worker. You're here to thin the veil for others. That's absolutely one of the things that you are here to do this time. Erik says you're very he says you're very stubborn and you're very like, I'm gonna do what I set out to do. So he said this time you came in to basically be like a workhorse, and no matter what life was gonna throw at you, you were powering through and gonna learn what you came to learn. You're quite an advanced soul, so to speak. So you kind of piled it on pretty heavy this time to learn as much as you could. It's like a marathon. Like, do you run marathon? Are you a runner?
I have been, yeah. My whole
Okay.
life.
He's talking about marathons, like just the challenging and the pushing yourself, and that's part of what you're here to do.
Okay.
What about here to learn? Oh, was that the one? Here to learn to power through?
Well, yeah, I guess, because he's saying that's what one of the things that you put on your plate this time. But another thing he says for you this time, you're here to learn from all of the different types of people that you meet, because he says you meet and interact with an incredibly wide variety of people. And you've had lifetimes where you have not had that opportunity at all. So you're here to learn from other people's experiences.
That makes sense. Allan, do you ever get to the point where you're like, ugh, people, I just want to get away from them? I mean, based on that life of solitude you had, I'm wondering if you have instances, I guess everybody does, but more so than most, like, oh God, people can be such assholes. I just want to go somewhere and be alone. Do you ever have that?
Yeah. So as she was describing that, I'm very comfortable on my own. Like,
Okay.
I've said it before, I'm almost too comfortable. I've had friends that have said it multiple times. Like, how is it that you can be so self-sufficient? Like, you can be so comfortable in such isolation.
Yeah.
And part of my mentality since I was very young was to make sure that I didn't depend on anybody, to make sure that at any point in my life, I could just be completely in isolation.
And that's why.
It's not to say that I love being on my own per se. Like, I love good company, like endless dinner conversations, like that sort of situation is my sweet spot. But when push comes to shove, if I had to choose between a chaotic environment, which is hyper-stimulating, which I know a lot of people love, or abject tranquility.
I'm the same way.
It is tranquility. And since I was young, like tranquility a million ways to Sunday, like all day long. I'm happier in that space. And even I lived in New York for years, and I just despised the endless noise. It was just wearing me out.
Yeah.
Just wore me out.
I'm so similar to you in that way. And I think that's why you came in to succeed financially, so you could be self-sufficient and live the life you're living now too, probably. But I think this is all so important to know before you start sharing the astrology, your astrology path. So do you want to go ahead and proceed with that, or would you like to say anything else? Because I don't have anything else intelligent to say. I'm telling you, it's all you. It's all you, dude.
Oh, you guys are the best. So it's a pleasure, obviously, to meet the both of you. And Jennifer, you can thank Erik because he's spot on with, the impressions and the information that just came forth. So, I grew up in an overachieving, kind of household. Your quintessential, I don't know. There was never enough, if you will. It was always pursuing a greater goal. From an academic or financial standpoint. And it was fine. It wasn't it's part of my DNA. There's something about being Jewish where the Jews have been persecuted for so many years, and we could feel it coursing through our family. Just keep accumulating, keep pushing forward. More education is better.
There we go.
And I would say
spiritual
in some
DNA.
regard,
it was in the spiritual DNA too, I'm sure.
And yet all the while I had a peculiar intuition. I had tendencies as a 3 or 4 year old saying things and doing things that would gain the attention of all the adults in the room. There was no clear explanation where it was coming. It was just that incredibly old soul showing up early on, but all the while overachieving siblings and some pressure to perform. I went down that path. I got a degree in finance. I wound up on Wall Street. I worked in the banking industry for the first part of my career. I wound up transitioning to financial technology, which was stable and commission-based and traveling the world, just doing large software procurements with some of the more...
What do you mean, software procurements? You need to talk to my husband. He is an asset management guy, and he's got this thing where you have not the 9 sectors, and he's rebalancing all the time. It's like, I don't know, I don't understand it.
There's a
freaking good at what he does. He has made people who had gone bust regain all their wealth. It's just like, I think he's psychic. Is he, Erik?
Yeah, he's definitely intuitive. Yeah.
And that's probably Allan. That's probably you too. But go ahead. Sorry.
So, maybe I'll send my money over to your husband when we're done.
You can manage your own money, of course.
Yeah, because, it's just one more practical underpinning that I'm happy to divest of. And that was just part of my past when I say large software procurement. So the money that your husband manages, the global banking industry runs on technology. It allows them to have less staff and allows them more control.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And I was part of a company that was responsible for selling one of the main systems that the world's banking industry operates on.
Wow.
And so I would go in, do the presentations, work with these bright minds in finance and convince them to open the purse strings and spend millions of dollars investing in our platform.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
and
But
I
he
did
works
it.
now with B. Riley. Maybe you could sell it to them. Maybe my husband could hook you up. But you're out of it now.
I have zero interest in the financial material. Like it doesn't.
Okay.
Like I said, it's something that
Been there, done that.
it's always there. Like I say, it's always in the DNA to seek another financial opportunity. But part of my path in this incarnation is definitely to evolve beyond it.
Okay.
I don't want, like, I don't begrudge or admonish people who are deeply in the financial.
Oh, no. We need those people.
You need those people. And I did my time. Like I totally did my time.
He loves it though.
And
All right,
I've got 2 million air miles to show for it. But
Jesus.
I am all set with that lifestyle.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so, but it served me wonderfully well. And it's exactly what Jennifer said. It set me up in an unusual position where when I get calls from people, like there's a woman at the UN in New York who's asked for a reading, and she's referred me to other UN diplomats. And I've gotten calls from some people that are in very interesting positions in life that you would never expect to seek out an astrologer. And yet the demeanor and, of course, my intellect just connects really well with those type of people, even though it's a hyper spiritual discussion. You know, like those are my favorite. There are plenty of the woo-woos out there that can deal with people who want a woo-woo discussion, and I think that's beautiful. Most of the people that I attract are generally they're on a different frequency, if you will.
And there's a need for that niche too. For those people.
It's more important than ever, because those people like myself that were told just get another promotion, you know, get a bigger W-2, just make sure that every year you're making more money and you'll be happy. But it's not working. Like there's more disease and dissatisfaction and anxiety and disconnect, and the family unit is suffering, and all the medications that are being thrown at people to deal with what their body and mind is telling them is that they're misaligned, and those meds might buy them some time, but it's not going to bring them to the place where they need to be. And so sometimes one of the best things that they can do is just take a breather and start to reframe their entire existence and figure out what's really important.
Wow, that's so powerful. You know, it's really weird because the woo-woo sector in general, I find, have struggled a lot in life, and most of the time financially. And so they really are just living paycheck. Some of them are broke, bankruptcy, etc. And, you know, I'm helping hopefully take care of some of them. But then you have who you are taking care of, those who have everything or nearly everything and are still extremely unhappy. And I have a lot of patients who were extremely wealthy and so miserable, and some who were dirt poor and were so happy in their life of simplicity and love. So.
Well, and that's it. And so everybody is different. And insofar as what it is that's going to define your happiness, if you're of a simple intention and a simple life is your journey, and that's beautiful if you can find yourself in that space. If you're of more of an achievement mindset, you're going to need to achieve. It's going to call to you. But all the while, if it comes at such an extreme that you're deprioritizing family and healthy interaction, or maybe your physical health because you're not eating well, or you're just not taking care of yourself because you're so incredibly captured and caught up in the ego motivated materialistic space, then inevitably you're going to need some balance. And I can tell you one of the saddest moments is when those people that were so sure that if only they got to some level, some external accomplishment, whether it's the promotion or the business that they sought or whatever it was, when those people finally achieved that and then looked around and said, holy crap, I spent years trying to get here, and I'm one of the few that actually got there, and yet I feel no more fulfilled than at any other point along the way. Those are really devastating moments for a lot of people.
Well, you know what I found? A lot of people finally get there, and then all of a sudden they die of a brain tumor. That's that disease coming in, and you're thinking of. I see it all the time. I especially with my husband's colleagues. I mean, they finally amassed this amazing amount of wealth, and boom, aneurysm. Die.
So I'm going to jump in here because Erik is chattering away at me, and he said, as humans in the physical body, without balance of mind, body, spirit, your personal life, your work life, without balance, you cannot in the human form maintain happiness for any length of time.
Yeah, it's totally true. And
The
so
4 roommates, he says, need to be aligned. Yeah.
yeah, and so that's, you know, it's exactly what I'm hoping to do with the next chapter of my life, is to just raise the consciousness and to create, first, lead by example, creating balance in my own existence, but then obviously help others that are seeking a little bit more purpose and balance, hopefully be a conduit to help get them there.
All right, I'm going to ask you one more question, and let's take a look at the charts and also talk about how you do them and what kind of astrology you do, because there's so many types.
Yeah.
Do you want to be like the spiritual guru / astrologer to the wealthy, since that class is like, or
not I don't, like, not at all. People find me because, just like anything else, we connect with different personality types and the energy lines up. Rich or poor, young or old. And to be frank, at least I'm not really, you know, it's more kind of as a spiritual support or spiritual guide or guidance of spirituality. It's really just to continue to create content and help influence people, whatever that looks like. So,
okay,
you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to turn my faith over to the universe, if you will, and just see what unfolds from there.
Oh, that's awesome.
And my intent, and I'm fortunate enough that I don't, you know, it's like you were saying earlier, there's a lot of people that are hugely spiritual, but their financial aspect is so underdeveloped that it leaves them vulnerable to the practical world.
Yeah.
And then there's some people that are so hyper-focused on the practical that they're spiritually dead inside, and they know something's missing, they just don't know where to find it.
Yeah.
And so my hope is that one way or another, I can start to bridge the divide, because at the end of the day, we all are in this journey together. And the sooner we come to realize that, you know, we're not all that different, we're just simply different skill sets that can support our way through it, I think the faster we'll be able to get wherever it is that we're intended to be.
Yeah, we're all one. We're all part of the collective. And we need to raise up our neighbors so that we raise up the collective.
Yeah, and so that's why, you know, when Trevor had made introductions and I had seen some of your work, it just made sense to talk to you, talk to Jennifer, to continue creating these type of conversations and seeing how, you know, in the most simplistic ways, we can positively influence the journeys of others.
Okay, so here you go. He made, this is Erik's chart he made. I thought, oh my God, I feel so bad. And this is mine. It looks like, it reminds me of doing theorem proofs in geometry and stuff. But you want to go ahead? You want to start with one of these charts, Allan? Or you want to start with how you do it?
Yeah, I'm going to invite Jennifer. So this is, you can, it's fine. We can post them afterwards and people can take a look.
Okay.
And you know what, I'll invite Jennifer, I'll encourage her to interrupt me as I go along, because Erik's going to either agree or probably contradict.
You will not be able to stop him.
And I encourage Erik to, just have at it, because the irony is that, so a natal chart is generated at the moment of your birth, looking at the energy as best as we've been able to measure it as it exists in our universe, which is nothing more than giving us a roadmap for why you're here, right? So if you think about the qualities that we usually use to describe one another, they're based on nurture and nature. They're based on the way we are raised, our cultural qualities, the perhaps the financial or socioeconomic disposition. And then there's the nature of it, which is our DNA, our height, our weight, you know, maybe even our IQ, which is a measurable quality. And so we say, oh yeah, I met this great guy. He's a tennis player. He's 6 feet tall. He's from Albania, whatever it may be, right? Those are the nurture nature qualities. But then sometimes we get along great with these people and sometimes we really don't. And we wonder what it is about the personality and energetically why we're drawn or repelled by people. Astrology is a nice tool, which is what has traditionally been used for like matchmaking, to speak of energetic attachments and connections. Because people that bring in similar energy, like attracts like, and there's a reason why we connect in that regard. It also more fundamentally tells you why you're here. So astrology as a predictive tool will do its best to explain why you incarnated, why it is that your soul is returned, and what areas are going to be most pronounced in your existence. So for this incarnation, so just for example, on that point, Lisa, you have quite a bit of energy around family. It's where your identity is. It's and it's huge. It has what are known as some challenging aspects, which means there's elements there that actually make you vulnerable in some of your interactions with family, or potentially the people that you bring into your home or your most personal space, because it actually deceives or blinds you to some of maybe the ill intentions or some of the nefarious intentions of other people.
Oh God, yes. One of my sisters.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so actually
awful.
female, so siblings is particularly pronounced, but and that's third house energy. Fourth house energy is actually the home. There's energy with father. Like there's all sorts of things that course through your chart here, but it's predominantly heavily oriented around those relationships as a big part of your growth and experience in this incarnation.
Interesting, because my father, well, and my mother too, was extremely abusive. I mean, he broke one of my sister's skulls, and you know, three of us, or two of us, fled to become homeless at very young ages. I mean, he used to beat us on a daily. We hid behind furniture when we were 6, 7, 8 years old. We heard the garage door, so that makes sense. So he was brutal to the very end. He was horrible. And when he died, I screamed with delight. I know that sounds terrible. And my sister, I took care of my father and my mother, you know, and their disabled daughter, my sister Denise, for 35 years, I guess. I was the only one in Houston, you know. And but then my sister, who was my best friend, lived with him the last, I don't know, 6 months, and fed him a bunch of lies and browbeat him into giving her all of his millions. So that's the sister energy in that house. That is so spot on. This is so powerful.
So, well, I'm going to give you a deeper reframe of it. So, Lisa, tell me your father's birthday, just so I have the sun sign. Your father and your sister.
8, 28, 21. No, wait. Yeah, I think. He's born in Barcelona.
Okay, and your sister?
2/12/56.
Okay, so so here's where it gets a little bit more interesting, and obviously, Jennifer, you're welcome to tap Eric's shoulder and see if he wants to jump in on this. So if we think back before we were in the physical realm, if we think before our soul actually chose this incarnation, we would have relationships, obviously, with other souls within the astral plane or within the spiritual space. And in all likelihood, because we had a set of expectations for this incarnation, we would have had to contract with some of those other souls to ensure
relationship villains, right?
Exactly. And so in that, now where it gets a little bit trickier is that obviously your father would have incarnated and he would have chosen perhaps a more like an abusive man. So his spiritual energy would have blended in with the brain of the subject, of the human that he became part of. He may not have chosen to be quite so, it may have gotten a little carried away. The energy may have misaligned itself.
Wow, that's what I've been told, that was the reason, but he went overboard.
Yes, that's exactly what Erik is saying. He went overboard. He took it to the extreme.
Yeah.
Overachiever. But, you know, I'm very grateful for that past because, like I've said many times, I learned so much. I mean, I learned how to be assertive, more compassionate, more nurturing. I'm sure I'm a better mother because of it. So I do not regret it at all.
Yeah, and so that might be part of it. And there will come a time when you can have more of a face-to-face with your spiritual energy and your father's spiritual energy. And it may be remarkably in an apologetic capacity where he says, hey, look, it wasn't intended to be quite that severe. Mm-hmm. And of course, without the egos in the mix, there's the forgiveness and acceptance and everything that comes with the metaphysical or the spiritual realm. But that would have all been part of that contracted kind of undertaking. And it would not have been dissimilar from your sister or potentially any other main characters that entered into your life that were ultimately moving you down this path of growth and awakening or evolution. I will share, though, when you look at your chart, the identity, which is your core, is sitting right on the cusp of Aries and Taurus. So you're 0 degrees Taurus. The Taurian energy is a very strong, determined, incredibly stubborn energy. Very family-oriented, but very stubborn. It's just barely past Aries. And Aries is going to be more the child of the zodiac. So it's going to have, by its nature, perhaps a more generous, incredibly loving disposition. Taurus is very loving as well. The Aries oftentimes puts itself in a position a little bit more easily to be taken advantage of, just because it is so quick to trust, and it has sometimes an impetuous or an urgent behavior where it just has its anxiousness to just get things done and to steamroll through them. What's trickier yet about your chart is that your intellect, which is measured by Mercury within the chart.
Be gentle. I'm kidding.
Yeah. So, and I'm just to accentuate. So Mercury is sitting right on top of your sun sign. They say sometimes a planet can be burned up by the sun if it sits too close with its alignment. So sometimes the judgment, once again, this is the clarity of mind and self, might be, because it's sitting in Aries and very close to the sun, might bring a little bit more intensity, even more to that equation. And then, as if that wasn't enough, your subconscious core, which is your moon sign, is also likewise in Aries. All right. So this is the masculine. This is the strength. This is a resilient energy. It's an explosive energy, but it also is leaving you vulnerable in some ways because of the trusting energy that brings to your relationships. And then, if we want to just to put the icing on the top, you have what's known as a tough aspect with the planet of delusion and illusion. It's something that will blind you to a reality at times, and that sits coming in from the 10th house, which represents the father, sitting right on top of the home, which would be both the intellect and the ego or self. So
this is so spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know everything about, I feel like I do, and I embrace all my, I don't want to call them flaws, but whatever, the things they have to work on, I'll just call them that.
Definitely not
but
flaws.
This is so spot on.
All right.
Erik calls them challenges or struggles or but not flaws.
Yeah, and so it's funny because classic astrology built out about 5,000 years ago, and over the course of those 5,000, it was an observational science where they would see when someone was born and they would do their best to measure the sky, and they would start to piece together one generation to the next what they were witnessing. And of course, the Greeks came along and they gave a lot of personality and characters to it. And those characters, they didn't know when they were looking at clusters of stars and they'd see a little dot go over it that they were witnessing, say Jupiter moving over an astrological energy, and they just gave it the name of Zeus. And they figured, okay, well, that must be a god that is influencing these personality traits, because when we see it at that time of year, we tend to notice this individual has these qualities. And so that's really how it all built out over many thousands of years, was just observing the night sky and observing the kids that were being born then and trying to map it out.
Fascinating.
And years later, although Freud was always conscientious of his reputation, but Freudian psychotherapy came out about 100 years ago or so, where he actually defined the 3 layers of the human mind, which of course we know as the id, ego, and superego. And that was nothing more than a parlay off of classic astrology, which speaks of the moon, the sun, and the rising.
Wow.
And so when I see somebody's chart, I can tell you their first impression, which is going to be the rising or projection of self. I can see their sun sign, which is, as we know, the ego or the most common self. And then I can see their subconscious core, which is where they go when they're scared, when they're fearful, when they're not even thinking. It's just the energy that funnels through as they experience life.
Well, can you list the traits of each of those on my chart? Just real briefly, like maybe just adjectives, whatever.
Yeah, so your first impression energy, which would have been very strong as you move through your career, would have been structured and disciplined. It would have had a presence about it. It would have had an authoritative energy. It would have created a good atmosphere that people could trust. They still can trust because you have your rising in Capricorn. And the Capricorn would be seen as, it's my sign actually. The Capricorn's the educator of the zodiac, and it's a determined, kind of responsible sign of integrity. Your sun sign, which is your true self, gets a little bit more complicated because it's split right down the line of Taurus and Aries. And that cusp, of all the cusps of the zodiac, that is the strongest, sometimes most unexpected cusp. And I don't know, that week in particular, and I did some research around it before the call, that last week of Aries transitioning into Taurus is an explosive week. So anything that, like, and I've got a list of them: the Waco massacre, April 19th, the Oklahoma City bombings, April 19th, the Columbine massacre, April 20th, the Virginia Tech massacre, April 16th, The Deepwater Horizon explosion, April 20th. The Boston,
The Titanic, didn't it sink on April 14th?
Probably. I don't have it because I only pulled out U.S. tragedies.
Oh, don't you care about the rest of the world? Well, I promise I didn't kill anybody last week.
So like the Notre Dame burning.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Oh, God.
Same week.
That is crazy.
The amazing amount of energy that carries into that week and right up to the very first day of Taurus is unbelievable. And I mean, I saw one of your interviews with, you channeled Hitler. Hitler is April 20th.
Yeah.
Right? Like that Wim Hof, who's the Iceman, who has 26 world records for athletic undertakings, April 20th. Like that cusp is an uncanny cusp.
Eric's calling it a.
Go ahead.
Oh, Eric's calling it like a pressure cooker.
Okay.
It's like two plates coming together that create an amazing amount of energy.
Okay, well, let's wrap me up real quickly because I want to go on to Erik. But basically, what does that, me being on the cusp, mean for me, for what I am like?
Yeah, so from
that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, a typical reading, I spend an hour to 90 minutes with somebody. We're getting obviously the 10-minute debrief here. But when you talk, and it depends on what it is that you want to figure out. If you want to compatibility, if you want to understand intention, if you want to be more predictive of what's coming next, those would all take us in different directions on our conversation.
Well, let's just go with who is Elisa, because that's probably what people care about, maybe if they care about it at all. I mean, I do, but.
Yeah, so your identity, your sense of self, your pride is going to be family-based. So it's family is hugely important. Influencing the community, education, communication with your surroundings takes on a huge influence as well. And then ultimately, there is spiritual undertakings, but it's not in a traditional sense. It doesn't show at any point early in life. Your spiritual undertakings are more kind of achievement-minded. There's more of a structure or intention around it, which is what you can do with it to bring reputationally some of the work that you're doing to a bigger audience.
Exactly. That's so right on.
Which is 10th house energy, and it's carrying through positive aspects from your work environment, which is the 6th house. I could tell you all day long, like you are exactly your chart.
Yes.
You are living. And I first we've spoken, but I've certainly seen some of the work you've done. Like your chart is just pieced together wonderfully for this incarnation.
God, this is incredible.
Yeah,
wow. Okay, so you want to go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't know if Erik has described it, and I don't know if this was part of his explicit intention or if maybe his human element kind of overrode him, but it is possible that his choice to leave early as he did was also part of the contract for your own growth and spiritual evolution.
Yeah.
And that would be my guess, just by virtue of the conflict and the energy that carries into your home.
Yeah.
And everything that you've been through is almost like, well, might as well just push it to its limit. I'll get through an abusive upbringing, and then I'll have children, and I'll have one of those children just check out on me, but not fully leave, so that I can go ahead and do this full transition.
Wow.
So Erik is saying, yes, it was definitely part of your experience, because he said basically when you decided to do this, you decided to go balls to the wall.
Yeah. Oh, Erik, thank you for sacrificing for me and for others, because really this is not about me. This is about how can I help the world, even if it's just one or two people at a time,
That's it.
Change tragedy to something positive. All right, you want to take a peek at Erik's chart? So
yeah,
fascinating.
We want to take on, from a spiritual and practical standpoint, we want to take on as much as we can without overdoing it. I looked at Erik's chart. I got the chills right away, because it's just such a hard chart.
Yeah.
Like
he's saying to me, it's interesting. He said it's an interesting chart.
It's as fascinating as they get, but it's overwhelmingly challenging. The amount of energy that it created and adversity. Like truly, if Erik was able to get through his 20s, and probably would have had to get well into his mid to late 20s to fully experience the brunt of the energy that he carried karmically into this incarnation, he would have gone on to like sainthood. He would have gone on, because he would have had so much pain and trauma under his belt, and he would have had to overcome so much adversity, both mostly with self. Like it's easy to kind of focus on some of the bristling that happens with the world around us. But this chart is one that was deeply conflicted innerly. And as far as he would have had to really do that deep introspective work to come to terms with some of his challenges, it would have put him in an unbelievably compassionate position to connect with a bigger audience. And maybe that's exactly what's happening now, is that the connection is happening when he's no longer in the physical realm. Because had he maintained his position here, the suffering would have continued for probably his whole life in varying degrees. And he would have eventually, based on his chart, transitioned into much more of a philanthropic, self-sacrificial individual to help others that were likewise in a state of suffering.
Well, you know, he once told me that the original plan was for him to wait until his late 20s, and then he would have killed himself outside of the home where I wouldn't have had to witness what I witnessed, but it would have been later on. So, but yeah, he had so many challenges.
I mean, like I said, it's almost like the hand that he was dealt was just too hard.
Yes.
Yeah, it was.
So what he's doing to me is actually he's making me feel physically dizzy, and he's telling me my head was spinning too much. My head was spinning too much, and I don't know if he said this before, but yes, he would have, had he made it into his late 20s, it would have happened then anyways. But this was another optional time for this to happen, and he said my head was just, and he said I knew there was no getting better. It wasn't going to get better. So he said, I just decided to go then.
Oh,
yeah,
poor baby. Poor my baby boy.
Yeah. So, and I can tell you, if you want to look at least a look at his chart. If you want, you can hold it up. This is just the easiest visual. So whenever you see a red line, it speaks of parts of self that are in conflict or ill-adversed, right? It means the aspects they're not congruent.
Real quick, he says, Mom, say something so you come up big on the screen so people can see the chart.
What?
There you go.
Oh, say something. Okay, I got you. Oh, yeah, of course.
Now move up the screen just a little bit more. There's a grid on the bottom.
I got to talk so people can see it. Hello. Go ahead.
So
Hello?
most of the time you see a combination of blue and red.
So, okay, I'm going to talk so you can see blue and red, right?
And if you look at that grid on the right-hand side, which speaks to all the facets of his personality and his subconscious and all that different energy, it's almost what are known as squares or oppositions.
Okay, I'm going to talk so they can see this, squares and oppositions.
Yeah, so anyone that has a familiarity with astrology or just wants to look that up, you get a sense of just how remarkably challenging that chart is based on its adverse aspects. And there was almost nowhere for him to hide. There was almost no part of his daily life where he could say, oh, wow, this is peaceful, beautiful, and just be alone and in a healthy state. It was going to carry with him everywhere.
Yeah, he says even if he had a fleeting moment of that, it was like a light switch. He said, like a light switch, all the other would come back in so quickly.
Yeah.
You know, what bothers me almost worse than his death is how much he suffered in his life.
So what he says is, okay, he says, don't focus on that because it was what I was there to do.
I know.
And so sadness comes if you don't get to do what you're supposed to do.
Well, that's true.
He said, I got to do what I was supposed to do. And now he says, look at how much we get to do. You're choking me up a bit. I'm a sympathetic crier. So when people start crying, I'm trying not to look at you right now so I can keep giving his message. But he said, it would have been more sad if I did not get a chance to do this.
Yeah.
So he says it's okay to be sad, but don't spend too much time there.
I don't.
I'm not sad. We are doing so much.
I don't. I very rarely anymore. You know, it's gotten better, especially after reading or transcribing his book. Even though the first couple of chapters were really very tough, it really went a long way to heal me. His book. Have you read that, Allan? My Life After Death?
You know, I've only come across your work just recently. So
okay. It is a page turner. It is amazing. And most people who do read it, it's a fast read. They say they laugh, they cry, you know, they don't want it to end. When it ends, they go through a grieving period. And Erik almost always pranks them. So it's kind of cool. But
Okay, I'll have a look.
I can send you the print ready PDF if you want.
Yeah,
But
sure.
okay. Now, anything else you want to add before we give your information, Allan, and of course Jennifer's?
Yeah, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, I know that Erik said that he was likely going to check out in his late 20s. There is a placement here that actually shows that one of his challenges in this incarnation was to find him in a space of contentment, which is kind of ironic. And so I would never contradict, you know, that he was definitely on a path of leaving. I like to think that there is a part of him that may even choose at some point to incarnate back with some of these challenges and be better prepared for what he's chosen so that he can find that contentment and truly start helping people in the physical realm, maybe even similar to the work that we're doing.
Okay.
It wouldn't surprise me because it's a very simple, lonely placement that says that his journey is to find his balance and contentment.
Erik, do you think you will come back into our family, like through one of your sisters or your brother? Or
no, he said no, and he kind of smiles. He said, I'm going to wait a little bit. I'm going to wait a little bit longer. So if he does, he said it'll be further down the line.
Okay.
Yeah, that's definitely what I would. There seems to always be at least.
One last question. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say there's usually at least a 60 or 80 year gap. You don't typically incarnate with people that would recognize you from a past incarnation.
Oh, okay. Got it.
You come back, you start over, and you have no recollection of where you've been.
Okay, so one last question. What kind of, do you use the classic astrology, but there's also the other kinds like the Vedic, the Indian?
You know, some people stand by Vedic astrology. So
Vedic, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm using Western or Caribbean astrology because culturally,
okay.
Canadian born, US raised, it's appropriate for the North America and Europe for that matter. Vedic astrology was designed for the Indian subcontinent. And so people that stand by Vedic astrology, you hear about it much more in India. And so there's more of a cultural affinity towards Vedic astrology. It is much heavier oriented around the forecasting of one's life.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, this shit is real, man. So it's working. Do you want to share how, if people want to get in touch with you, Allan? Do you want to?
Yeah, you know, it's fine. Like, it's simple. It's just astrological.com. We have a simple website out.
I'll put it right here. Boop.
Yeah.
Allan, ALLAN.com.
You got it. And like I said, we don't do a lot of promotion. We just do simple kind of interactions, and people that feel called to communicate with me, they tend to find their way into my space.
That's true. And Jennifer is at psychicmediumjenniferdoran.com, which I also will put here. She and Jamin have an event that I'm opening up my house for them to host about anxiety and depression, and Erik's going to be there talking to you guys, giving you hugs. Well, no, unless you trans-channel, that's not going to happen. But anyway, so that should be fun. Anything else you want to share, Jennifer or Erik?
Just thank you for doing this, and I love you, he says, and he does blow you a kiss.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all. I'm going to just stop the recording, but I'm going to stay on just for a second to say one or two things, real quick. Bye, everybody.